two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
This is the
from WBRN Radio and on the Red Network. Our episode is the Monday Morning Quarterback. It is on the 13th of January. This is Boston Red and the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Some interesting news here as we update our episode. The Houston Astros and Major League Baseball. Let me start with Major League Baseball. They have fined the Houston Astros $5 million for stealing signals. Now, the Houston Astros system is based upon an algorithm, and not only that, on machine learning, and coupled with some live video. In other words, they were stealing signs. The manager was suspended from 1 year from Major League Baseball, AJ Hinch, and also their general manager. I don't remember call his name right now. With those suspensions, and the owner of the Astros has fired AJ Hinch, and the general manager, he cleaned house there in Houston, and also they lose this year, 2020-2021, their first and second round draft picks. And the scandal has extended to the Boston Red Sox, and Mr. Cora there, he was a bench coach in Houston in 2017, 2018, and of course this goes to 2019. If you recall, Houston was in the World Series, and they have been accused of stealing signs all along. Now, this does reflect badly on Major League Baseball. If one side is known to be cheating, stealing signals, it goes back a very long time. There have been discussions about that. I can recall when NBC had the Game of the Week, Joe Gaggiola would talk about how to steal signs and how signs were stolen. And also Mr. Kubiak was there. The old timers, it goes back to Yogi Berra, and various others have been able to steal signs, but this was a much more sophisticated way of stealing signs, of having a live video transmission. You can do that, and coupled with a little bit of analytics in the stew, you could do it in a much more precise manner, because you would be able not only to scan, but at the same time to manipulate your scanning, and you could get all sorts of things like miles per hour, etc. You could integrate that all into your broadcast, and not only that, you could record that. It's sort of like the same technology used in robotics. Robotics, of course, they use that in terms of X-ray technology. Let me get ahead of myself here. But what they're able to do with the X-rays is go into several 100,000 X-rays that have been recorded, and the program can scan those X-rays, and of course that is very valuable in determining various cancers, because, for instance, they can look at lung cancers, and then these thousands of 100,000 X-rays or MRIs, they can look at all those and look at the spots and better improve as the cameras improve. I know when I was first diagnosed with prostate cancer, the types of, they used x-rays, and they also used MRIs, the whole 9 yards. And coming back several years later, they had new machines at the medical center, so they were able to precisely look and see if there were any. They didn't find any tumors, but if there were any tumors there, plus blood tests, and they looked at the lungs and seen some spots on the lung that had not gotten any bigger. So those things are there, and that also applies to various other things. Cardiological exam, which I had a couple of weeks ago, what's called a sonic EKG. They look at that, and they can tell you how the old heart is pumping, etc., etc. Anyway, this type of technology could also be used in getting baseball signals, and what you're looking at, since you recorded this, depending on how many years of recording you had, but we'll say for instance several seasons, and you could then look at it, and then you could pinpoint not only how the what the signals said the pitchers were pitching, but actually what the result of the pitch was. Say for instance a pitcher was pitching a slider, or a curveball, or a knuckleball, or whatever the pitcher was pitching, how effective it was. All that could instantly come in. Was the pitcher able to strike out the hitter, and that sort of thing. Not only that, you could use your analytics for field positioning. They use a lot of positioning now, that they move players around constantly, but that could be based on pitches. We'll have more of that as we cover the story on All About Sports. We'll get one up and talk about this, and hopefully we can get a little bit more in the analytics and look at it from the standpoint of Cranston Analytics, our analytics division, and a little bit of how this is done in 2019 and 2020. Anyway, this is, talk about Monday morning quarterbacking. That's quarterbacking baseball scores, and then you start looking at such things out of the business of baseball. Did the stealing of the pitches affect the points, the spread there for baseball? Baseball is a little bit harder to bet, but again, you don't have the scores that obviously you'd have in basketball or football. Hopefully, no team is going to run up a 50-10 score, something like that. But nonetheless, the scores are there, the over-unders are there, and those games are bet on, and a lot of money is won or lost if you can steal a sign. And the signs, you have multiple signs that, from the old with hands and with motions, and sometimes with the you can even use the bubble gum if you wish to. There's all kinds of ways of doing that, and hopefully we'll get some pictures. Now that would be better served on a YouTube type broadcast where we could actually show you some of the signs. Anyway, we'll see what we can do with that. We're out here. Cory Booker, the former Twitter king that was deposed by DJ Trump, I suppose, but nonetheless, Senator Booker from New Jersey dropped out earlier today. His contest did end the same as with Kamala Harris, a matter basically of funding, and persuade the backers of his campaign to go forward with the funding and the polls. Well, why was this? Why were the numbers so dismal? Well, in Iowa, a lot of people agreed that Senator Booker had a good message. His message was unity and love. Well, love didn't go on. There's not too much love in the Democratic Party these days when they're in a sea of hate. And that is another philosophical discussion to be taken out there. How do you combat hate? Well, the hate now, because of social media, has much more intensified on a nationwide basis than what you had during the days of Dr. King. Yes, there was hate in the South. You had the Ku Klux Klan, white citizen councils riding about, and you had the Nazi Party, Rockwell's party running around at the time. But you didn't have the degree of organization that you have today, nor did you have the degree of weaponization ideology was a little different because you have the nationalistic movements. Now, if we go back to the 40s, you had Schicklgruber, Hitler's National Socialist Party that was across Europe. That included Mussolini and Japan, and of course had Salazar in Portugal, Italy under Mussolini. Did I mention him? Anyway, with a number of them that were fascists out there. And we had an American First Party here. People like Lindbergh, the aviator, was a big fulcrum for that party, spokesman for America First. In other words, they were fascists in America, period. And they're fascists still in America, neo-fascists and various other people. And this is a sort of a theory that we have here, and I don't know if we'll be able to get any more about. We're looking at the Iowa poll here, Des Moines Registry, but why Senator Booker, people went to his various events in Iowa, were impressed, but he was not on the list. And the same thing happened with Kamala Harris. The same thing happened with Mr. Castro out of San Antonio. So all the people of color are gone from the race. Well, Andrew Yang, I forgot about him. But the only African American left is our own Devon Patrick. He's left, but he doesn't make much of a noise. So therefore he is there. What happened to these people? Well, part of it is the difficulty of raising funds with these various people. Booker had always been a quasi corporate type from his days of being nauseous about remarks that were made pertaining to brain capital and Willard Romney when Willard Romney was running. And in Newark, he wasn't as popular as they would have you think he was. Sharp James defeated him in his first run, and then Sharp James had to go away for a while, and then came back to Heroes Welcome, and even Booker had to, before he decided to vanish us from his Twitter feed, he welcomed Sharp James back after we welcomed him back. But in Newark, the urban ghetto of Newark, his reign there was rocky. Did he get the results that he thought he was going to get? No, because that is because of the relationship that the financial people have with Newark. Is basically seen as a colony, as a blight there. And under the present mayor in Newark, they have made leaps and bounds in terms of progress on the mayor Baraka. But he decided, this is Cory Booker, not to run at the time for governor. He could have ran against Teuton Christie, and so he ran for the Senate. Teuton didn't want to be a senator. Teuton was a governor, and Teuton had ambitions to run for president. That went nowhere. He got into, this is Teuton Christie, got into the Trump administration, tried to get in the Trump administration. I think Teuton is doing a sports broadcasting thing now. Nonetheless, Senator Booker has returned to the Senate to fight the good fight at this impeachment episode is coming up. Incidentally, Nancy Pelosi, who is the leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, is transmitting tomorrow, it's reported, the official impeachment papers to the Senate. They just walk those down a long hallway, and it's over to the Senate. So she will transmit those over, the 2 articles of impeachment, and then old man McConnell, who is the leader of the Senate, and their Republican apparatus will decide how he will run it. He is now boss McConnell, and he will do what he wish in terms of how the Senate will conduct this. Initially, at least in the Bill Clinton's impeachment episode, each party was allotted about 24 hours, not at a time, but a few days of this speechifying, as they used to call it, would be there. And then will they call witnesses? Probably not, but they could have depositions out of the discovery process are more like interrogatories, or which are written statements drafted by the various attorneys. That's probably what you have. Or you could just have written statements, period. Or you could have video depositions on the rules of civil procedure. You could have that. Although this is a political trial. Or you could have the attorneys for each side, for the House and for DJ Trump. And they could ask questions, if they like, of whatever witnesses they tend to agree upon. It's decided for us here at WBRN Radio that how we will cover this is a little bit different, because all the monopoly corporate media, they will be covering this for all it's worth, and the American people will get just bored for the most part. And we'll see where the polls go. We'll do an overview of it before it starts, and we'll go back to the Nixon episode. He was not impeached, but Tricky Dick was forced back to California. We'll talk about that, and we'll use commentary from the left, none other than the leader of the CPUSA, the Communist Party of the USA, Gus Hall. We'll get his historic take on it, and we'll see where we're going with it. Let's get to the Iowa poll, and I think we'll do the Iowa poll first, and then we'll give you the methodology involved in the Iowa poll and some other things. Nonetheless, this was the Iowa poll. It was conducted by the Des Moines Register, CNN, and Media.com. Bloomberg is, I guess, out of the mix there. And Ann Salzer is still in charge of it. J. Ann Salzer. She's been around Salzer and Company out of Des Moines. They conduct some polls. They are the Cadillac of Iowa polls, and we'll see if they still remain that. And according to her, there's no denying that this is a good poll for Bernie Sanders. He leads, but it's not an uncontested lead. According to her, he's got a firm grip on his supporters and the rest of his compatriots, she calls them. And also there's some division Politico was sowing there, saying that some people that were present when Bernie was talking to Liz Warren when she decided to run for president, that he thought that a woman could not be elected president, and Bernie said they are liars. And there's also some scripts in that, being in campaigns, I know they're always overzealous campaign workers saying that Liz Warren basically appeals to affluent liberals. Well, there's no doubt from our look at it, she does appeal to traditional liberals within the party, and there's no doubt about that. Some affluent liberals out there, but at the same time, she is feared by many within the party. So this whole idea of trying to drive a wedge between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, it's just simply not going to happen, and that's what Bernie has said. Anyway, let's get on to the poll itself. Shows 20% of likely, and this is a word caucus goers have Bernie Sanders as their first choice, and they're all basically tied up together there with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. She's at 17. Little Petey is at 16. It would call a statistical tie. And then in behind there is Joe Lunchbox Biden. Period. So these people are all pretty much tied up here together in this poll. And let's go into some. We'll get to the crosstabs here in a minute. The percentage of those who said their mind is made up, which candidates support in the caucus, have risen to 40%, up 10%. This is in former Iowa polls. That's basically about it. But 45% say they could be persuaded to support someone else. Another 13%. So it's wide open, basically, from what this has said. We can only look back and see where the Iowa poll is. And, of course, on the day after February the 4th, February the 5th, everybody packs up, leaves Iowa, and won't be back 4 years unless they decide to come back. Now, this poll is of 703 Democrats, likely caucus goers. It was done from January the 2nd to January the 8th. Has a margin of error of 3.7 percentage points. So, in other words, the cluster there doesn't mean a whole lot because of the margin of error. The percentage of those who say they made up their mind, we already talked about that, who they were. And the caucus process is an invitation to keep an open mind. That's from J.N. Salsa there. Nothing that the Iowa poll produces similar letters of undecided, noting that undecided caucus goers at the same period during the 2016 crowded Republican primary. There's no doubt about that. Other candidates, including those banking on a late burst of momentum, failed to gain much ground in the poll. And they mention here Cory Booker, he's long gone. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, we'll have something more on her. Klobuchar at 6%, Booker, of course, at 3%. Andrew Yang, the entrepreneur, had 5% in it there. So this is sort of typical of that. There's somebody named Ireland here, Linda Ireland. She's 65 years old, from Waterloo, Iowa. Booker is her first choice, and Klobuchar is her second. But she likes Buttigieg and Yang. That's kind of an unusual trio there. Anyway, I'm going to caucus for Booker. If she won't be caucus first, I guess she'll have to caucus for Amy. The caucus process makes the second choice critical after the first vote on caucus night. Candidates who don't receive at least 15%, now this is, remember this, 15% in a precinct get dropped from contention there. Those who initially back a candidate who fails to earn 15% then vote again for the final time. So Ireland said that she's making her choices. If Mayor Petey, she says, does really well, and there's no one viable in my precinct, I'll go to him. I probably would go down the line, and she mentions then Amy Klobuchar. So that's the hope that Amy has, that somebody doesn't make it there, and they'll find her as a viable candidate. And now, a new poll, a slew of other candidates fell way behind the 15 mark there. They mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard, she's from Hawaii, is focusing her attention, of course, on New Hampshire. Very wise for her. Tom Steyer, he's at 2%. Steyer is holding study in Iowa, but hasn't gained enough ground in other early states during the place in the debate. Doesn't matter that he's a billionaire. And Mr. Bloomberg, he just skipped it altogether. He's putting millions of dollars into TV ads, and he barely registers here, elsewhere there. And of course, some of these characters, Delaney Bennett, you can forget him. He's long gone out of there from Colorado. He's gone so long people have forgotten who the hell he is. Anyway, Sanders supporters are more likely than those who support other leading candidates to say they made up their minds. 59% there, they're extremely enthusiastic about their candidate. 49%, just 32% of Warren supporters describe themselves extremely enthusiastic. And 26% of Joe Lunchbox Biden and little. There was a thought that his support was a holdover from when he ran before, and that would evaporate. Well, that was wrong there. Bernie has always had a strong organization in the state of Iowa, and he has built upon it. And the key to Bernie is his young people. If all the people were my age and Bernie's age, he wouldn't be going anywhere, but that is his situation there. Who caucused for him while he's also growing support among young first-time caucus goers, those notoriously difficult groups to turn out on caucus night, she says, but Sanders has done it before and appears to be on track. He'll do it again. He has maintained support. 44% of those who say they caucused for him in 2016. Warren earned 20% of his former supporters. Now we'll see how that holds up there, and he leads with those younger than 35, earning 36% of that vote. Warren follows him at just 20%. So that is some of what is going on there. He's someone I followed in the last primary and really liked. That's Matthew Quick. He's 25-year-old PE, a teacher from Essex, Iowa. As a teacher, Quick said his focus on that's Bernie's on education. And Bernie has been focused on these for many years. He's not a late convert to those periods. So again, that is a different situation with him as far as where Bernie is. Get this Amy Klobuchar article here. I found it. This is from the Star Tribune by Mary Lynn Smith. Amy Klobuchar remains stalled just behind a cache of top Democratic contenders there, according to the poll. There's no doubt about that. And of course, Bernie Sanders being in the top of it there, and various other types there. But it's 20%, 17%, 16, and 15 there. I think the big question here was Joe Lunchbox Biden lose more there. Now, some polls have actually put Amy Klobuchar higher than the 6% there. Some 7, anywhere from 7 to 10%. I've seen. Very difficult to tell on that, especially if she's a second choice. The campaign continues to see growing momentum since the Senators' debate. Amy Klobuchar, and of course again tomorrow night on Tuesday they will debate again, has more endorsements of former legislators in the state of Iowa than any candidate. This is one poll. Several others have given bigger numbers. No doubt about that. Again, that is not an indicator. On our scorecard, she's number 3 behind Liz Warren. Anyway, besides Klobuchar, 5 others are qualified for what will also be the first debate of 2020. That is Mayor Petey, Buttigieg, Tom Steyer. I'm surprised he qualified. But anyway, debate may be make-or-break moment for Klobuchar, says Steve Scheer, retired Carleton College political professor. She has to be aggressive and go after some of the candidates, just as she did with little Petey in the last debate. She has to develop momentum coming out of it, according to the professor. The traditional wisdom is there are only 3 tickets out of Iowa. The top 3 have a future in a national contest. I disagree there. Iowa can have as many as 4 seats out, maybe 5. It depends, because obviously if these people are bunched up together within 1 or 2 points, and the way that the votes are allotted in Iowa proportionally, she doesn't lose out on it if she's in the first 5 tickets. But anyway, cracking the top tier is especially important because it would help her raise more money and get more media attention, no doubt about that. If she were to come in 3rd or 4th in Iowa, she's in good shape. But to do that, she has to basically knock off Mayor Petey and cut into Joe Lunchbox Biden. Now, Biden could drop down, there's no doubt about that. From Larry Jacobs, he's a political science professor at the University of Minnesota. She's very well positioned. If you told me a year ago that Amy Klobuchar was going to be right in the mix a few weeks before, I wouldn't have believed you. Well, from her backers, including Mondale and various others, the money was there. There was no doubt about that. And she's run a very retail type of campaign. Voters are moving around amongst the top 4. That's from Scheer. And if she can get a superior debate performance, perhaps she could get some of those wavering votes. Well, they're out there. There's no doubt about that. She's visited all 99 counties. Have been riding a wave of national attention after receiving performances in November and December. Is more important for a candidate, just as it is for football teams or baseball teams, to play well in their last games. We saw that happen, and we don't do the NFL around here, but we saw that unfortunately happen to the Baltimore Ravens. They had rested players, etc., and they were a little bit rusty there, and they found themselves in a pickle, as Mr. Stout would say, and then the Tennessee team is going to the playoffs, to the AFC, and the Ravens, they're back in Baltimore. Anyway, here we go. A campaign report. She collected $11.4 million in contributions the last 3 months of 2019. Nearly half of the more than 25,000 she raised. 25 million. she made since joining the campaign. So she's just now getting her fundraising up. She needs to get enough dough now to go on to New Hampshire. And here's what's happening here. The whole situation is that you can leave New Hampshire and Iowa and New Hampshire. Those are the more European type states. And then you go to Nevada and to South Carolina. She could stay in the mix, no doubt about that. There's no reason there to keep on. Most of these candidates, if they can raise any money, they need to go to Super Tuesday, period. Doubling down on Iowa, where she has put much of her effort, she released a new ad to kick off her day of action in the Hawkeye State organizing push on Saturday that will include canvassing phone banks and the Iowa snow and ice. She was also in Nevada at the same time. So moving ahead there, period. So that is one way, obviously, of staying on top of things in Iowa. Very retail politics situation there. That is kind of a landscape. Klobuchar finds herself with Steyer, a billionaire there. And then she has, of course, Bloomberg stealing. He's not in Iowa, but that changes the contest. Well, one of the things about these contests, they can always change, and that is really where you go with these contests. And in this is out of Des Moines. Buttigieg fades, but many still consider him. Well, yeah, that. Let me get a little bit more into him. 9 percentage points ahead of Warren, his closest competition. That was in the November poll at 25%, 9 percentage points. But in weeks since then, he has more criticism on his record. The man from Facebook fared worse amongst leading candidates in share of support. Those made up 40%. That's compared with 59% for Bernie, 48% for Liz Warren, 44% for Biden. His favorable ratings also have gone down direct. His favorables have fallen 4 points. Well, a lot of that, his favorables, people really don't know who in the hell he is. That used to be his great claim to fame. He was very likable, and there were very few who didn't like him, she said. Some of that luster's lost in this poll, no doubt about that. The share of those unfavorables have risen to 24%, but they will rise much more than that as people get to know Mayor Peavy and his record. Still, he retains a footprint of support. Well, yeah, he trails the largest universal potential support with 60%, saying they're considering him in some capacity that includes 16% who name him as their first choice, 15% who is their second choice, and 29% actually considering him. That narrowly besets Warren, who's still first and second choice. That's very important there, falling from 66 to and a high of 71 in September. She's now at 59% there. Biden fell 3 points in his footprint measurement to 55. Bernie ticked up 1, and Yang and Amy Klobuchar at 40 and 41. Now that is one situation. You got people like Yang in there, but Mr. Yang, it's hard to say how Yang will do once he moves out of Iowa and New Hampshire, especially the places like California, since he's Asian. And according to Salsa, the numbers seem to indicate a little less room for Amy and Yang to grow. And that's kind of interesting. Her support amongst those office holders in Iowa is very interesting, because we would normally expect Joe Lunchbox Biden to have those people. They seem to settle on numbers they're going to get. She says this is a big field with 4 strong top contenders. What sort of showing in the caucus would be good enough for Andrew Yang to move forward? 78% of men on the 40 say they view Yang favorably, as do 73% of European men with a college degree. Klobuchar gets more favorable ratings from older likely caucus goers, 69% of women aged 55 and older. Conversely, 32% of younger caucus goers than 35 view her favorably. Again, what Salsa's typical through the idea of political lanes are arguing that caucus goers don't approach their decisions that way. But you look at the data and you kind of go, well, these look like lanes. So again, the lanes that she has is kind of an interesting lane there. Warren, of course, obviously, and Bernie are battling for the Progressive Caucus board. Biden and Buttigieg are attracting a more moderate crowd, a high proportion of Buttigieg and Joe Lunchbox Biden, 75, and respectively say they'll choose a candidate with a superior chance of defeating DJ Trump is extremely important to them personally. It's 54 for Warren. 78% of Biden supporters and 84% of Buttigieg supporters say that a candidate's ability to unite the country is extremely important to them. That fact is extremely important. 65% for Bernie, 58% for Warren, 64% of Biden, and 61% having a candidate who can bring Republican independence on board is extremely important. Just 38% of Bernie's supporters and 46% of Warren supporters feel that big base. That's the old basic argument. Do you go with the independents? That's where Hillary Clinton went, but not enough. And the old middle-of-the-road approach, that's what Bill Clinton took. You can win elections. The same thing Tony Blair did. But the problem is you cause problems out there. Forward plurality of Biden supporters, 29% say Buttigieg is their second choice. Plurality of Sanders supporters, 44% say Warren is theirs. And the plurality of Warren supporters, 31% says Sanders their choice. The Buttigieg supporters are split on their second choice with 20% for Warren, 18% for Biden. You won't find his supporters. The poll really displays the Warren Sanders connection and the Biden Buttigieg connection. Well, that's a different connection. There's no doubt about that. Period. What are the candidates' strengths and weaknesses? The U.S. faces heightened tension in the Middle East with Iran. Supporters of Biden and Buttigieg express confidence in their ability to lead the military. Then supporters of Warren and Sanders placing their candidate amongst his own supporters. 86% said Biden's ability to lead the U.S. military is more of a strength than weakness. Just 1% says it's a weakness. Anyway, that would be out there. Buttigieg is the only candidate polling in the top 4 to have served active duty. Well, it wasn't much of an active duty as far as well. They have his backers. Again, this is kind of a cheap shot. He got into it there at the last moment. And this is, I think it's good to have somebody who at least has the context of that mindset. So there's some respondents there. Somebody out there, Buttigieg as her first choice. You'll find that old Buttigieg's people are more moderate or more conservative than Bernie's amongst their own supporters. Sanders and struggle on measures 61%. His ability to lead the military strength anyway, that is so forth and so on. Suffered a heart attack there, and although he hasn't slowed his campaign schedule, there's no doubt about that. Bernie is still going. He had a strong weekend there in the Iowa cold, and again, you're going to see more. I think as far as Iowa is concerned, you'll see more material in tomorrow's debate with Iowa. Now, how that will go to New Hampshire is kind of hard to say. I think we covered most of the methodology here. I was looking at it and some of the things that happened in between. Like the candidate's resume is 79% more of a strength there. Resume as overall first choice 79%. Biden is at 87%. Bernie is at 87%, and Liz Warren is at 93%. And old Mia Petey is at 59% there. The candidate's physical health there, well, Biden is at 55. Buttigieg, I don't know if they know his, is at 95. Bernie is at 37. And Warren is at 87. Well, all those people in the 70s said Buttigieg. Anyway, the candidate's ability to understand the problem people face, like me, overall is 92% for the Democratic candidates. Biden is at 85. Bernie Sanders at 91 and Warren at 96 and Buttigieg at 95. I'm surprised about that one. Anyway, candidate's ability to lead the military. I think we talked a little bit about that. Biden at 86, 1 point ahead is Mia Petey. And Bernie is at 61 and Warren at 50. Don't be surprised about that. Period. And amongst the Democratic caucus, we were first choice here, and yeah. And they rotated that around. Is the one I bet I like best, has the best chance to defeat him. For the Biden supporters, 69%. For Buttigieg, 50. For Bernie, 66, 55. I think we'll leave it at that. Move along like we have a little bit whatever going on here. Let's see what else we can kind of scare up a little bit of here. Look at our time here. Our time's not too bad. Incidentally, the deficit risen to my cheat sheet here at 1.2 trillion dollars this year. So this is some of what is going on here. Let me go to Reuters here, mix this up a little bit here. And Democratic President's hopeful Biden aims to keep Nevada. Now this is moving on a little bit ahead of the ball game. Sparks, Nevada. The Democratic candidate Biden, who working class Joe, says with pride and courts a multiracial voter base, and faces a stern test of his ability to win nationally in Nevada's mining and unionized gambling powers. That'll be on the 22nd. Nominating contest is the third one, state by state process there. And again, the election, I thought it was on the 4th. The general election will be on the 3rd of November. And according to this article, Biden's strength will show up in Nevada with its larger Latino population, and in South Carolina with the African American population. Even if Biden doesn't win in predominantly European Iowa, that would be on the 3rd. And in New Hampshire's on the 11th. States with 2 nominating contests. And this is a question we raised earlier. Do these contests count that much? Well, I suppose you'd say Iowa last year. Bernie actually won the contest. He's robbed. But between he and the monster, they were 1 and 2 in Iowa. Bernie then won New Hampshire, but he got blocked. It was stolen from him out in Nevada. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. Nevada is on the 29th of February, and then we have South Carolina is on the 29th. And then 14 states holding that contest. That'll be on Super Tuesday. That will be the big one in some of these candidates who are left even standing there. This period. Nevada, where candidates appear to minus casino workers. They are the hometown now of the All-American hero O.J. Simpson. Anyway, he has a larger proportion of African American Asian residents than Iowa, no doubt about that. New Hampshire, biggest share of residents who did not graduate from college. Testing his appeal, of course, to blue collar, he'll do well there, and so is Bernie Sanders. There's a lot of them who stand out, but have to go with experience. Specifically, Biden, and that's Mercano there. He's a retired automobile assembly worker. He likes. He was Joe Lunchbox. Biden was out there. He's opened 6 offices across the state, hired more than 50 in staff, and drew a large standing room in Sparks, Nevada. So Biden, Nevada is a good place for Biden, period. But also at the same time, now we have the Reuters poll here somewhere, released on the Thursday, showed Biden with a slight advantage. Biden was tied with Sanders tied with Biden amongst the Latino votes. One interesting thing here, He trailed Biden by 6 percentage points over. That's according to a Fox poll. Don't have the Fox poll here, but Bernie is going toe-to-toe with Biden when you start talking about the, here's this contest here. Let's get the Reuters poll here. It was conducted the 8th through 9th of January on behalf of Thomson Reuters. A sample of 1,116 adults, 18 plus, in the continental U.S. Hawaii interviewed in English. The sample included 479 Democrats, 409 Republicans, and 144 independents, and was weighted. Are you currently registered to vote? Not. 82% of the respondents were, 90% of Democrats, 86% of the Republicans, and 75% of the independents. With that question, let's move on here. Now, we'll look at this. This is the Reuters poll. Anyway, 15% for Joe Lunchbox Biden, 10% for Liz Warren, 17% for Bernie Sanders. And, well, Booker's long gone now. Only 5% for Mayor Petey, or former Mayor Petey, I suppose. And the rest of them are pretty much down here in the contest. And let me just check on one other thing here. Credibility interval here. Well, 5.1% there. Okay. Continental U.S. So this is a national poll here, I suppose. But it has Bernie ahead in this particular poll. So all respondents here, 18% for Joe Lunchbox Biden, 19% for Bernie. Petey and Bloomberg are at 6% each in this poll. And then we have different issues. Who can unify the country? Well, Joe Biden is at 23%, Bernie's at 18%, Liz Warren at 12%, Mayor Petey is in the single digits there. Their game changer, Chris Jackson, who you talk to here, he's, I guess, you can email him. He is Vice President of U.S. Affairs at ESOP. They used to be Roper, who I used to work for. Anyway, these polls have changed, but basically they are telling you about the same situation there, and it hasn't changed a lot when you look at it where Reuters is. And again, that's basically it. Top line. And let's see what else we got here very, very quickly. We won't do Bowens this time around. We'll throw them in. There'll be other opportunities that we will have to talk about them. And also this week we'll have a Numbers Man production out here that was done. So we'll get an opportunity to talk about it and where the numbers are there. We'll have some very important numbers there. And let's see what else we got going here. Oh, the Royals, let's don't forget them. The Queen made a statement today. As most people know, Harry and Meghan, they decided they will spend their time between North America, being Canada, and the UK. So, again, that is where they will be. And we'll see how that works out. Period. So we're just looking at some other things here. And we'll get to the Numbers Man presentation. The Saudi Aramco IPO record $29.4 billion. A lot of dough there. And incidentally, I believe on Wednesday DJ Trump and the Chinese will sign a phase 1 of their agreement on their tariff situation there, and they'll see where they go on that particular one. So you're seeing various things going on here where people are attempting, at least we'll say, to and we'll be looking at gross national products and some other things. Incidentally, we will have an open source report. We're looking at robotics. We need to finish that up. We'll get that in the next a couple of days here. Our schedule is about the same. Most of the information we give you, like the Iowa poll and the Reuters ISA poll, that data is fairly flexible and will remain. Perhaps we'll see some changes after the debate tomorrow night in Iowa, and we'll get some New Hampshire polls. We'll bring those up in our skeleton type of coverage here. And as we align ourselves for these situations coming up, particularly Iowa and New Hampshire, and we'll look at the long view there and see how things are going. Also, there, Nina Turner, Senator Turner from Ohio, wrote an op-ed in South Carolina talking about Joe Lunchbox Biden and the African American vote. We'll be looking at that. Strategic, particularly how Bernie is doing with African Americans. He's doing much better with Latinos. Now, this is very important as he goes west to California, particularly California. He goes to places like Texas. Liz Warren is not getting that kind of traction there. And where Joe Biden stands. Now, if Bernie can do well in Nevada with the Latinos, he's in good position to go to California and do well there. So we'll see how all that turns out there. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the 13th of January, 2020. Good day. See you soon, as they say.